Welcome to the Perspectives on IBC series, where advisor Chris Tormey joins me in a discussion on all things related to the infinite banking concept. In this educational series, you'll learn the basics of IBC and how you can recapture the financing function in your life so you can gain more control and freedom of your wealth. All right, thanks for joining us. We're here on episode number 4 in the Foundations of the Infinite Banking Concept. And so today, back again with a good friend of mine, Chris Tormey. So we're going to chat about a couple different topics today. But what we're going to start with is, the term infinite banking concept. Some people kind of think of it as maybe a marketing ploy or something, but Nelson Nash named it that way for a good reason. And so we're going to cover that as we kick this off. It's infinite meaning endless, right? Endless opportunities. So Chris, what's your take on this topic around why it's called the infinite banking concept?
Hey, Tom. Good morning. Great question and a wonderful term, infinite banking concept. So the word infinite to me, and I think to Nelson, as I heard him talk about it, is the fact that it's always there throughout your life, and it's something that you're reaching to and into. We'll get more into that later as well, the usefulness of it. The word banking, obviously, because it's a place that you're storing wealth. Banks originally were vaults that held and protected wealth. And the concept, because it's not a product, it's a concept. It's something we think about as a way of life, or as a way to structure a certain aspect of our life, our savings and investment ratio. And he came up with that, probably 40 years ago, and never wavered.
Yeah, no, and infinite really sticks with me for sure, because just like in life, like infinite possibilities, right? And maybe we may not always believe that, but it really is. It's out there, right? Anything's possible. Look at what's in our world today.
Yeah.
Some of these things, someone had to dream about them. So, really limit. And obviously for a sort of a banking sort of process in place, like it could be used for anything to fund investments, education. It's your choice, which is really cool aspect of it. Fund your business. So you don't have any restrictions on how it can be used, and certainly as for those thinking much longer range, bound to perpetuate this wealth for future generations, right, of our families, and so I think of it infinite banking, infinite that way, right? And to your point, it's not although there is a product assigned to it, it's a process, and we'll kind of get into more. We've said that before. It's kind of this process that and platform is whole life, but it's whole life insurance, but it's really a process of storing wealth and deploying it under our control, right? So one of the things that I think is foundational to IBC is our rules, and Nelson Nash sort of spells out some basic rules on infinite banking. So we're going to cover those a little bit. So Chris, you want to kick us off with that?
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. I think they're just wonderful, wonderful rules to always think about and live by. The first one, as I recall, is think long range. So when you're talking about life insurance, no matter what your age, if you're healthy enough to qualify, long range is what you should be thinking. And we went through the illustrations a bit in prior podcasts, but there is some investment early on in the structure, in the foundations of the policy itself. Its usefulness comes quickly, but in thinking long range, you want to always be addressing what's the best way to keep this policy healthy and ready for good use at all times, or in good use. So I love the first one, think long range.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's a really good one, and it's in our world of, and we joke around this sometimes too, is we want things like immediately, right? We live in a world where everything's instantaneous, from purchases to other things. Like we get impatient. Well, yeah, thinking long range really, I think is important in this concept, because some of the natural tendencies are to focus on what do I get immediately, and some of this takes some time.
And I think the second rule kind of fits with that, which I believe is don't be afraid to capitalize. So the nature of these types of policies is your premium dollar is basically delivered into the insurance company in two flavors. One is the base premium, which supports a very large death benefit relative to the premium you're putting in. And the second is the paid up addition, or, future premiums that the insurance company allows you to contribute now, which almost immediately become largely cash. And I think don't be afraid to capitalize means don't be afraid to put a good amount of that total premium in the base policy, because in that way you're building a much bigger container and you're making an investment, a more serious investment in something that could really be a profound asset for you to use for the rest of your life. And I have seen in and around YouTube and the internet, this idea of, 10% into base premium, 90% into cash value. Well, you're highly limiting the size of your potential cash holdings by starting that way. To capitalize your structure, like building a bigger house, is going to take a larger foundation, but the result is going to be, just that much bigger and better for you. Size properly for the, each and every client or situation.
Yeah. And if you kind of take this from the perspective of a business, right? If you're building this financing part of your life, right, that you're going to be able to leverage this process, and certainly the tool to help finance things, people have to build businesses, and it takes time. You have to invest in it. And this is kind of the concept of capitalizing your sort of banking system and business, right? That's kind of how I think about it. And it does take some investment and energy and inertia to kind of get it going. And so you just have to be mindful of that and recognizing that it's your system requires it to function as well as you'd like it to.
Absolutely. And really, you don't have to have a single infinite banking concept structure. You can build one that fits for, I wouldn't say for now, but let's say for the next 5 years that we can see in terms of income and savings and all sorts of other factors, your goals, what you want with it. But then almost all people have to have term life to support their to have there for their loved ones if something happens to them. And that term life can convert later into a new policy at the same health rating that you got in the beginning, or better if your health is improved, and that can build another foundation. So we don't be afraid to capitalize, but at the same time, we can build multiple structures here along the way.
Absolutely. So the third rule is don't steal from the system. So if you think about this for a moment, it's when you read the Becoming Your Banker book, it talks about, grocery store example, right? Stealing the peas, right? So this goes into, you're building a system here and a process to finance things. So there is going to be a requirement to borrow against your policy to finance things. And so this is where it becomes a discipline you have to build to pay that back, right? Just like you're borrowing from a financial institution like a bank, you're just borrowing from a life insurance company, and you have to continue to pay this back. You should. Now, there might be a case down the road that you don't, but for the most part, as you're building this, certainly in the early stages, you should be paying this back into your system, right? Just like an honest banker would. And so, Chris, any thoughts on your end on this?
Yeah, I remember the can of peas story very, very well. And, the nature of the conversation that Nelson had is those peas had a cost to them, let's say $1, and now you're selling them for $1.20. You can't let yourself or your employees just walk away with the cans because you're going to destroy the capital and the potential for profits of your grocery stores that gets carried away. So just because you own your systems doesn't mean that you can treat it as if it's just yours to consume. You can use it, but not consume it all. And you really have to be respectful of the capital you have in there. And the other thing, I'd say about that is I like to always, with my clients, to discuss a plan B. So if plan A is to invest $10,000 into a particular opportunity, what happens if that opportunity fails? How do we then get the $10,000 plus interest back into the policy? Let's talk about, your day job, if that opportunity is a side hustle or something to enhance that. Let's talk about your expenses and the number of vacations you take a year. So just have those hard conversations early on so that we don't put the entire burden on the opportunity. And if the opportunity fails, well, that's that. No. We're going to borrow from this policy. We've got to have multiple plans to get that money back. And even when it's successful, like a real estate opportunity, and let's say it's adding, $10,000 a year to your wealth, make that first 10 go back in. Don't use that first 10 as half for lifestyle and half for putting it back in, or even worse, 80% for lifestyle changes and 20% back in. Let's get that capital back in there so that it's ready for the next opportunity.
Yeah, no, great stuff. So simple rule number 4 is don't do business with banks. Now, this one, I think even for Nelson's history with this, it took him even a little while to get to this point, right? I think banks are just a just normal part of our lives. It's and we're so used to it. It's not going to be, you're not going to be able to do this immediately. But the concept is to start to build this system so that maybe down the road that you will not have to rely on banks, right? And some of the negative aspects of it in terms of maybe lost interest and other things that come with storing your capital there. And so over time, I think if you think about the other rules, they all kind of help to support this. If you think long range and you keep on capitalizing it, you don't steal from the system, you're going to be able to build up enough of a storage bin that maybe some point you can avoid using the bank for financing completely, but it's certainly going to come with some time.
Yeah, I'd say this is the one I've really had to think a lot about because I think banks, as we talked about in a prior podcast, are wonderful for moving money around. We have a new system we use to try to generate more savings out of your net income in your world. And the bank, a bank is the center of that to move that money. Your money comes to you from your employer that way, and it goes out to credit card companies and gets debited from your savings account regularly. So that cash flow aspect, I just think nobody does it better. On the lending side, I really do think that's what Nelson was really concerned about vis-a-vis the banking system. And I think there is a big difference between people who are small business owners, small, medium-sized, non-public business owners, and how the bank can be the senior and sort of bully partner in that relationship versus W-2 employees who work for a corporation and it's really salary that gets taxes subtracted and so forth, where they don't really see the business capital aspect of that partnership as easily. I mean, what we see as W-2 employees, which I was for 2 decades in the earlier part of my career, car loans, 1.99%. I mean, unless I can somehow pay cash and pay 10% less for the car, which I haven't seen that at dealerships. What's wrong with the 1.99% to pay? And that is different from many in the infinite banking concept system. So, this might spark a debate. Mortgages are given IRS advantages and also are fairly low rate assets because they're kind of part of the American way. So this is a tough one for me. I definitely use banks, and most of my clients do as well. But I do get it from a forester / business owner / personal pilot. He was his own autopilot, independence, and not having, maybe sometimes a difficult partner in a business venture that a bank could be, is where he's coming from on that. But what are your thoughts about that, Tom? Did I
Yeah,
I see there?
yeah, I think it's really about having additional control of the capital in a lot of ways. Like your analogy with the car loan, that makes sense. Interest rates are really low, but if something happens, they're still going to continue to knock on your door for you to pay, right?
True.
So you relinquish control to the banking environment, right? So within your world of an infinite banking sort of process and system, you have more flexibility and freedom to even delay payments and pay later, whatever. So it's all under you have more freedom and use of your dollars. So I agree with you. Banks have their role in the society, and certainly from a transactional level, it is a best sort of approach. But for larger financing needs, I think utilizing the tools and the loan provisions within a life insurance policy give people more control and freedom of their dollars, and keeps more of their dollars working. So this this is where this is maybe capstones the different rules around IBC, because this is rethink your thinking. We can get so stuck into one way of thinking, and we can sometimes lose sight there's other ways and perspectives to consider. And so this whole world of infinite banking and as you explore it, requires people to start thinking a little bit deeper. How's the system functioning? Is it working for me or not? And is there a different way? And that hopefully will sort of touch on not only how we finance things, but probably even broader than that, right? Just don't accept things. So it just and take some energy to think about it and think about what's the reality of it.
Yeah.
So that's what I take from that one.
Yeah, I just say real quickly, I see a lot of clients when I start to work with them, putting away assets for a long time from now, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, in those retirement buckets. And they look at them every day. They have them on their phones, but that's non-touchable until 65 or 70 or whenever it might be. But by the rules of the IRS, it's non-touchable till you're 59 and a half without some pretty hefty penalties. But even in their own minds, it's like that's money that's just going to take care of itself for the next 20 or 30 years. I think what Nelson was thinking when he was thinking, rethink your thinking, is says too many thinkings, is basically you can use your capital if you've got it in the right places, and that can really enhance wealth really tremendously. There are tax advantages to those other vehicles, but there are liquidity and access to capital disadvantages that I don't think are often considered as seriously as they should be.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And it takes effort, right? Because in a lot of different ways, we want simplicity in life, and we talked about this before, and it makes our lives easier. And to have to think about something more deeply and understand whether it's right for us short-term, long-term, requires more energy. And so this is an exercise for people in the world of thinking about their financing, a different approach, right? That might be advantageous for you than what is the typical. And so I think it's a challenge for folks to rethink their thinking, because that takes work, right? And so there's a system, right? You have to be disciplined to utilize the infinite banking concept, right? It isn't for people who have bad money habits, right? It's not a good fit.
Yep.
So
that's a good part of it too. Discipline comes into play. Yep.
Yeah. And so those are we just wanted to cover these to kind of give, because they're broad strokes and it really gives a frame around the infinite banking concept itself, because we can get so hyper focused on the product itself, whole life insurance, how it works, show numbers and all those things. But we did in the last episode to some degree, but really understanding the broad strokes of kind of the rules around it, it really hopefully helps people get grounded on kind of the broader strategy. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit here, Chris, and I think within the Becoming Your Own Banker book, I think Nelson recognized that, some of these things are not easy, right? We are conditioned in certain ways as humans. We have human tendencies that stop us from doing some of those things, thinking long term or rethinking our thinking, and maybe stop us from maybe being able to take advantage of something like the infinite banking concept. And so I want to cover those very briefly. And certainly I would highly encourage you to, when you're reading the book, to kind of go deeper in here, but we're just going to go through it in kind of a high level right now. The first human problem is called Parkinson's law. And in a nutshell, it's, a lot of it was initially sort of connected to, we probably can procrastinate a bit. And if you're giving a certain amount of time to accomplish a task, you're going to take all that time, right? Well, how does that relate to our finances? Well, similar in nature, when we make more money, we start spending more money, right? We're going to spend up to what we make and we don't save as much. And that's a tendency we have as humans. And so this was to get to infinite banking, you got to have money to save, right? And be disciplined with that. So that's number one. Parkinson's law.
Yeah, the one thing I'd add to that is it basically feels like an expense because it's either a regular monthly or a regular yearly contribution, but it behaves like an asset. So, it's regularly put forward into that account, and basically you build that discipline, as you said, to put towards it, and you actually get some pleasure out of that. As you move forward, I do personally, and most of my clients as well, especially the ones who've been doing infinite banking for more than 2 or 3 years, is every dollar you put in is a joy, like a dinner or a nice drive on a Sunday. It's a real good feeling. And so that's really what Parkinson's law is about in many ways, is the more you make and the more cash flow that comes to you, the more you want to enjoy life. And you can enjoy life through consumption, which is sort of the typical way. You can enjoy life through a balance of consumption and wealth growth, which could also give a nice charge of joy.
Yep. So number two, the second human problem is Willie Sutton's law. You want to go through that one?
Well, Willie Sutton was a bank robber way back in probably the 20s, I think, the 1920s. And he was once asked, why do you rob banks? And he said, well, that's where the money is. So Willie Sutton's law is, if you can create your own bank, then you know where the money is. And you know how to access it, not to steal it, back to steal the peas. Don't do that. But you have that money now, and I think that's where he comes down on that. I don't know if you've got more to add.
No, I think that's great. Yeah, that's all it is. Now, the third human problem, the golden rule, which is a little different than what we would normally equate to the golden rule. This is more, if you have the gold, then you make the rules. And so it's certainly about having access to capital to take advantage of, opportunities that come your way. I mean, a lot of what we're taught, we're tucking money away that's not accessible, right? Whether it's in qualified plans or maybe stuffed in our home and not easily accessible. Here, it's about having capital at your disposal to take advantage of opportunities that somehow find you when you have it. So this is the concept of being able to make sure you have that capital ready to deploy.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember, the way banks mainly lend is against assets. So in a way, the gold is the asset that you're pledging up to the bank, and it gives you money. When you incorporate IBC into the way you do things, it's your actual physical productivity and personhood that you post as collateral, your life insurance your life insurance cash value, but the death benefits integrally attached to that. And you post that essentially to your partner, and we think a much more fair partner in this partnership, and that's the insurance company, to then take that cash to deploy. So the gold's maybe in the asset that you're pledging, and in the case of infinite banking, it's basically the productivity of yourself, as opposed to an external asset. So you, as the gold, makes the rules. Again, we reach on how do we want our partner versus us relationship. Do we want a very senior partner who makes all the rules, or do we want a partner that, that's integrally involved with us and our well-being for the rest of our lives.
Nice. So the fourth human problem is the arrival syndrome. And this is a pretty simple one that, unfortunately, there are many who fall prey to this where they feel like they know everything, right? They have figured things out in life and figured what's right for them and don't go exploring or not open-minded to exploring new ways or ways to improve what they're doing. They have arrived. And so for folks who are like this, obviously that's why the rethink your thinking is so challenging, because they feel like they know everything, right? They don't need to think about it. And so this is, that you're listening to this shows you that at least you're open-minded about it, right? Still not be right, may not be right for you, but you haven't arrived. You're willing to learn and continue to grow. And that's key for just life success in general, not just in your personal finances. So that's the arrival syndrome, pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I always think of the Mark Twain, I'll paraphrase about when I was young, my dad knew nothing. It's amazing how I got older, how much he learned and how wise he became. So, that was a guy in Mark Twain who accepted that he didn't have the arrival syndrome. He was, as he matured, saw how much he could learn from others, in that case, his father, but you can learn from everyone that you come in contact with.
Absolutely. So the last human problem, we'll wrap up this part of it, is the use it or lose it. So why don't you share that, Chris?
Yeah, use it or lose it. We were talking about this just before the podcast. I think what this means is sometimes with this vehicle, people will sock it away and don't even think about it till they're much, much older. So they sort of use it as a quiet compounding growth fixed income vehicle that's got great tax advantages and real consistency in returns. So great qualities. But if you're able to think about it as capital available to mix your own talents and interests and the proximity of opportunities around you with that capital, well, you can compound your wealth much more quickly with that combination of time-tested compound growth in a tax-advantaged vehicle and accessing it for periods of time when either there's an emergency or an opportunity that you can engage with. And I think that combination is what really leverages up your potential for wealth growth.
Absolutely. So hopefully, sharing the rules, we've shared the rules around IBC and some of the human problems that may come our way that maybe makes it difficult to adopt things like the infinite banking concept or just new concepts in general. So hopefully that sheds some light on some of the sort of broader principles of IBC and some things to look out for, even for ourselves and how we behave. But, to wrap this episode up, I think, this goes back to the last word, concept. This is a concept. It's an understanding of a principle that comes from our experiences and from thinking about things differently, imagination. And this is not just about whole life insurance. Yes, it's the tool that we use as part of the platform. And we can get so mired down into the weeds of illustrations and numbers and such and all the nooks and crannies of life insurance. But at the heart of it, it is a process, right? It's a process and it's not a product. And it's a process to control and own your own financing of everything in your life. If you can expand your mind and think differently about things. And so that's what we want to sort of hopefully share with you today is just kind of the high level areas that, encapsulate the IBC sort of world. So Chris, any last parting shots on this episode?
Well, use it to lose it. I just was thinking while you were finishing up there, over my right shoulder is a stock certificate of Walt Disney Company or Disney Studios. And Walt Disney was out of money with plenty of ideas back in the 1930s. I think it was probably around the Depression. And he actually used his whole life insurance policy to basically get Disneyland going out on the West Coast. So there's precedent for the use it or lose it concept for sure. And I'd say overall on the infinite banking concept, it is a different way of thinking. It does take discipline, but when you get the understanding of what it can do for you and your loved ones and for the amount of decades that it can do it for, it becomes a really interesting thing to learn more about and to spend time thinking about. And along those lines, Becoming Your Own Banker by Nelson Nash is always worth a read. And we're giving you our best interpretation of what we gained from it. But if you have the opportunity to read it, it's a good one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, great. So we'll end this one now. We'll be back for episode number 5. So thanks for listening.
Thanks so much, Tom.
Thanks for listening to this podcast and hope you're enjoying this series on the infinite banking concept. Next up is part 5, the life insurance industry. In addition to the podcast, I would highly encourage you to get the book, Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash. If you want to discuss how IBC can enhance your financial life, feel free to book a free call with our team. We'd be more than happy to help. Visit perennialpride.com to book your call.